Sometimes life breaks us in places we never expect, but every now and then, it sends someone who knows exactly how to help us stand again. This is the extraordinary story of a Navy admiral who lost everything in a single moment, and the humble single-dad janitor who did the unthinkable when the whole world turned its back on her. A story of courage, betrayal, unexpected kindness, and a love strong enough to rewrite the past. If you think you know how it ends, trust me, you don't. Before we begin, if you love emotional healing and inspiring stories like this, feel free to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next journey of hope and quiet heroism. Thank you for being here with us. The summer air at Norfolk made everything look softer than it truly was. Sunlight filtered through rows of white chairs set neatly on the manicured lawn, casting long shadows across the ceremonial aisle, lined with rose petals. The flags of the United States and the Navy stood proudly at the back, unmoving like silent witnesses who had seen more heartbreak than any human ever could. In the very center of it all sat Admiral Mia Hale, dressed in the crisp white uniform she had once been so proud of. Today, however, her hands trembled as she held her officer's cap in her lap. Not from the injury, not from the wheelchair she'd been confined to since the accident, but from something far more painful humiliation. 30 minutes ago, she was supposed to stand at the altar. 30 minutes ago, she believed she still had a future with someone who loved her. But Commander Evan Brooks had walked into the bridal suite with a letter and a face that looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His words were clipped, rehearsed, and as calculated as a strategic withdrawal. I can't do this, Mia. I can't build a life around someone who may never walk again. Then he left. Left her sitting there in her uniform and veil. Left her alone. Left her broken. Now, with the ceremony grounds fully decorated, the guests already dismissed, and only a thin breeze moving the rose petals at her feet, Mia stared forward with empty eyes. She tried to swallow, but her throat tightened painfully. Her entire military career had been built on composure, on never letting the world see her flinch. But her hands betrayed her, her breathing betrayed her, and worst of all, her heart betrayed her aching in a way she had no defenses against. A soft crunch of footsteps on grass broke the silence. Mia didn't lift her head. She didn't want anyone else's pity, especially not from those officers, lingering on the outskirts, whispering about her, like she couldn't hear. Then a small voice rang out bright and amazed. "Daddy, look. She's a real Navy princess." Mia blinked. That voice didn't belong to any officer's child. It was too lively, too innocent, too pure. She turned her head slightly. Walking across the lawn was a man in worn olive fatigues, boots, scuffed sleeves, rolled hair long, in a way that suggested regulations no longer applied to his life. He pushed an old maintenance cart with one hand and held the hand of a little girl with the other. The girl, maybe 7, wore a simple red dress and white sneakers. Blonde curls bounced as she skipped, tugging her father forward toward Mia without fear or hesitation. The man slowed as he noticed Mia's expression. Something in his eyes shifted recognition, perhaps, or maybe compassion of a kind that wasn't patronizing but deeply human. He clasped his daughter's hand gently. "Kayla, sweetheart. Let's give the Admiral some space." But the little girl shook her head emphatically. "No, Daddy." She looked sad. Mia's lips parted, stunned. People had spent the last hour avoiding her eyes, afraid to confront her pain. But this little girl, she saw straight through the uniform, the medals, the wheelchair, and she wasn't afraid of any of it. The man hesitated, then approached slowly. His posture was respectful, solid, steady, and when he reached a few feet away, he stopped and stood at attention. Then he raised his hand and saluted her. It wasn't a pity salute. It wasn't forced formality. It was honor. It was acknowledgement. It was the kind of salute a soldier gives someone they truly respect. Maya felt the sting of tears return, but this time they weren't from humiliation. They were from the shock of being really seen after hours of feeling invisible. "I'm sorry to interrupt, ma'am," the man said quietly, voice deep with sincerity. "I'm Dylan Carter. I work maintenance over at Hangar 3. This is my daughter, Kayla." Kayla gave a tiny wave. "Hi, Admiral Princess." Despite everything, a weak laugh escaped Mia's throat, fragile but real. I'm not a princess, sweetheart." Kayla stepped closer. "Daddy says all the bravest ladies are princesses." Dylan exhaled through his nose, half amused, half embarrassed. "She has her own vocabulary for heroes." Heroes? Mia almost flinched at the word. How could she be a hero when she couldn't even stand? The breeze lifted the corner of the letter still clutched in her hand, the letter Evan had left her before walking out. Dylan's eyes flicked to it, then back to Mia. He didn't ask. He didn't push. But the quiet understanding in his gaze was unmistakable. She swallowed hard. It was supposed to be my wedding day. Kayla gasped softly like this was the saddest news in the world. Dylan's jaw tightened just barely, not in judgment, in empathy, in anger on her behalf. But he kept his voice calm, gentle. "I'm sorry. No one deserves what happened here." Mia's breath caught again. She clenched the letter, knuckles whitening. He said he couldn't do this anymore. That my injury changed too many things. "Your injury didn't change you," Dylan said immediately. The conviction in his tone startled her. Kayla stepped even closer until she was at Mia's knee. "Do you want a hug?" the little girl asked. Mia forgot how to speak for a moment. She pressed a hand to her mouth, the emotion rising too quickly for her to stop. Tears spilled silent, but unstoppable. Kayla, undeterred, wrapped her tiny arms around Mia's arm, resting her cheek gently against the white sleeve. Dylan watched, heart heavy, but warm, like he was witnessing something sacred. Mia whispered, voice cracking, "Thank you. Both of you." Dylan shook his head. "You don't owe us thanks, ma'am." She looked at him, then really looked. His eyes were steady, deep-set, carrying a quiet sorrow of their own. A man who had seen things, lost things, survived things. A man who understood abandonment too well. The rose petals rustled again. Somewhere behind them, the honor guard finished packing up. But the world felt strangely distant, like only the three of them remained inside a small pocket of stillness and truth. Dylan adjusted his grip on the maintenance cart. "If you're okay, Admiral, we'll head out and let you have your space." Mia surprised even herself when she whispered, "Please, stay." Dylan froze. Kayla looked up at Mia with bright, unwavering eyes. And for the first time since her world shattered, Admiral Mia Hale didn't feel alone. The ceremony lawn had emptied almost completely by the time the late afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, softening everything into golden warmth. But the warmth did nothing to thaw the cold inside Admiral Maya Hale's chest. Her wedding had evaporated into silence, leaving behind only scattered rose petals and an ache so deep it felt like it lived in her bones. Yet, she wasn't alone. Dylan Carter hadn't moved since she'd asked him to stay. He stood a respectful distance behind her wheelchair, his daughter Kayla still clinging gently to Mia's arm, as though she were something fragile and precious that needed holding together. It unnerved Mia how easily this gruff, quietly strong janitor and his radiant little girl had walked into her disaster and made her feel less hollow. Kayla Dylan murmured, "Maybe we should give the Admiral some space now." But Mia's fingers unconsciously curled around the little girl's hand. "No, it's all right," she said softly. Kayla beamed and continued leaning against her. Dylan paused, searching Mia's face. He wasn't the type to impose, she could feel that. The kind of man who took care of others from the shadows without ever drawing attention to himself. The military had thousands like him, with calloused hands, weary hearts, and a sense of duty that didn't vanish with a uniform. Mia cleared her throat. "You don't need to stay out of obligation." Dylan's answer came without hesitation. "I'm not staying out of obligation, ma'am." Something in his voice, low rough around the edges, honest, made her chest tighten. They stood there in silence until Mia forced herself to inhale deeply. She looked down at her cap, brushing a thumb across the insignia she once wore with pride. "I should get used to being alone in moments like this." "No one should get used to that," Dylan replied. Mia glanced back at him, startled by how sincerely he said it, by how much weight his words carried. Kayla tugged lightly at Mia's sleeve. "Daddy says strong people know when to ask for help." Mia exhaled a shaky breath. "Your daddy is very wise." Dylan chuckled softly. "She gives me more credit than I deserve." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. But there was something in the way he shifted his weight, the way his gaze wandered toward his daughter, as if she were his anchor in a storm nobody else could see. A man who carried his own wounds. A man who knew abandonment, struggle, fear. Maya swallowed. "How old is Kayla, 7? Dylan answered. "Going on 17. He ruffled his daughter's hair, earning a squeal. "She keeps me in line." "You don't listen," Kayla corrected with exaggerated seriousness. Dylan smirked. "She's not wrong." Mia found herself smiling again, softly and voluntarily. It felt foreign, but good, like the first breath after resurfacing from deep water. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The wind stirred the petals around Mia's chair. The ceremony arch still stood behind her, mocking in its elegance. Everything she'd built her career, her love, her future, had been stripped of meaning in a single hour. But the presence of these two strangers brought a strange kind of peace, like the pieces of her heart had stopped falling apart long enough for her to breathe. Dylan adjusted his stance again. "Ma'am, if you need someone to call, or if you need a ride, I don't need anything." Mia cut in gently. But even as she said it, she realized how brittle her voice sounded. Dylan didn't contradict her. He simply nodded, accepting her words even if he didn't believe them. Kayla let go of Mia's arm and walked around to face her. "Can I show you something?" Mia blinked. Of course. Kayla carefully reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a wrinkled paper, drawing 2 stick figures, holding hands with a third smaller one between them. "It's me and Daddy," she explained proudly. "But sometimes Mommy's there too." She pointed to the empty space beside the taller figure. "So I draw her when I miss her." Dylan froze, a subtle stiffness rippling through him. Pain flickered across his eyes, a pain so old and familiar it nearly startled Mia. She lifted her gaze to him gently. "Your wife left," Dylan said quietly. "A long time ago." Kayla didn't seem hurt by the admission. She looked at her father with pure innocence, as though his truth was simply part of their world. Mia lowered her voice. "I'm sorry." He shrugged once, not bitter, not angry, just honest. "We manage." Mia studied him a moment longer, realizing something she hadn't noticed before. The strength in him wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. It was quiet, steady, and deeply rooted, a strength she desperately wished she had today. Footsteps approached from the side, 2 junior officers passing by to collect leftover chairs. When they saw Mia, their faces tightened awkwardly. One nodded stiffly, the other avoided eye contact entirely. Mia's shoulders tensed, but Dylan took a single step closer to her, not in a possessive way, not confrontational, just present, subtly protective. The officers straightened unconsciously and moved on. Kayla frowned. Why were they looking at you like that? Because people fear what they don't understand. Dylan murmured, his gaze steady on Mia's. Or maybe they don't know how to handle someone else's pain. Mia inhaled sharply. His words hit too close to her truth. Thank you, she whispered. Dylan tilted his head. For what? For standing here. He didn't smile. He didn't deflect. He simply gave a small nod like he understood exactly what she meant. Kayla tugged on her father's hand. Daddy, can we help her be happy today? Mia's breath caught emotion tightening her throat again. Before Dylan could answer, Mia spoke first. You already have. Kayla clapped her hands triumphantly, then wrapped both arms around Mia in a full hug this time. Mia closed her eyes, letting the tiny embrace wash over her, warm, full of innocence and acceptance. When Kayla finally pulled back, Dylan cleared his throat. We should let you rest, Admiral. Mia wanted to tell him no, wanted to keep that rare comfort for just a little longer. But dignity forced her to nod. Thank you, Dylan. Truly. He saluted again, crisp and respectful. Kayla waved with both hands. Bye, Admiral Princess. As they began to walk away, Mia felt something she hadn't felt since the accident, the faintest spark of hope. And she realized she wasn't watching two strangers leave. She was watching the only two people today who had actually stayed. The sun had dipped even lower when Admiral Mia Hale finally gathered enough strength to wheel herself away from the ceremony lawn. But the ache inside her chest still felt as raw as it had moments after Evan walked out of her life. The rose petals stuck to her tires as she moved, soft reminders of a moment that was supposed to be beautiful, now twisted into something she wished she could erase. Dylan Carter and little Kayla had already disappeared down the walkway, but their presence lingered with Mia like a comforting warmth she didn't know she needed. As she entered the quiet interior of the officers' hall, the scent of polished wood and navy blue carpet filled her senses. Usually, she found solace here. Today, every corridor felt suffocating. She rolled herself into the small, private lounge by the window and finally let the folded letter slip into her hands again. The letter, the weapon Evan used to sever everything between them. Her vision blurred as she unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably his neat, controlled cold. Mia, I cannot marry someone whose life will be defined by limitations. This injury, it changes everything. I deserve a future that isn't weighed down by medical decisions and unpredictability. I need someone normal, someone whole. Whole. As though she were missing something that made her less of a woman, less of a person. Her breath trembled. A soft knock sounded on the doorframe. Dylan stood there, hesitant, almost apologetic, holding Kayla's backpack in one hand. You left this on the bench outside, he said quietly. I didn't want someone taking it. Mia's voice cracked. Thank you. You didn't have to come back. I know, he replied. But we did. Kayla peeked from behind him, her innocent smile fading as she saw the tears on Mia's cheeks. Admiral Princess. Why are you crying again? Mia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she handed the letter to Dylan, a gesture she didn't fully understand herself. She barely knew this man, and yet something inside her trusted him more than the officers who'd served beside her for years. Dylan unfolded the letter slowly, his jaw tensed after the first line. By the second, his brows furrowed. By the last, a storm had gathered in his eyes. He inhaled hard, steadying himself before speaking. No man with a spine writes something like this. His voice was low but firm. This isn't honesty. This is cruelty dressed up as logic. Mia swallowed. He said he needed someone whole. Maybe he's right. Maybe my life is no Dylan cut and sharp enough to silence her. He didn't leave because you're injured. He left because he's weak. Kayla climbed onto the couch beside Mia, resting her head gently against her arm. "Daddy said strong people stay," she murmured. Dylan exhaled. "She listens more than I realize." Mia wiped a tear from her cheek. "You're very protective of her." "She's all I have," he said. "And after her diagnosis, her mom decided she wanted a simpler life." He paused, voice quieting. "She said she didn't sign up for a sick child." Mia felt her breath catch. "I'm so sorry." Dylan shook his head. "Don't be. Sometimes losing someone gives you room to protect what really matters." Kayla curled closer to Mia. "Daddy's brave. Like you." Mia let out a soft, broken laugh. "I don't feel brave today." "That's the thing about bravery," Dylan said gently. "You rarely feel it while it's happening." His words sank into her chest like warmth in winter. But the raw pain surged again when her gaze drifted back to the letter. Dylan followed her eyes. "May I?" he asked, lifting the paper slightly. She nodded. He folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and handed it back to her. "Admiral," what he wrote. Dylan said slowly, "It's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his character." Mia's throat tightened. "He was my fiancé, Dylan. I thought he loved me. I thought he'd stand beside me." "You're allowed to grieve," that Dylan answered softly. "But you're not allowed to blame yourself for his cowardice." The firmness in his tone surprised her, not because it was harsh, but because it was protective, fiercely protective, yet filled with empathy. Kayla tapped Mia's hand. "Do you want me to tear the letter? Daddy lets me tear bad things." Dylan stifled a smile. "Kayla." But Mia shook her head gently. "No. I need to keep it. Not because I want to remember him, but because I want to remember who I will never allow into my life again." Dylan nodded approvingly. "That's strength talking." But the moment softened again. The weight of everything pressed on Mia's chest until she whispered, "I don't know how to move forward from this." "You start small," Dylan replied, "with breaths, with moments, with letting people help you even when you don't want to." "Like you?" she asked quietly. He opened his mouth, then stopped. For the first time, a flicker of vulnerability crossed his features. "I don't know how much help I can be. I'm just a janitor." Mia shook her head. "No. You're someone who stayed." Dylan looked at her for a long moment, longer than politeness allowed. Something unspoken passed between them, delicate and profound. Then he cleared his throat. "If you ever need someone to talk to, even if it's just to sit in silence, Kayla and I are usually around Hangar 3. Kayla nodded energetically. "We can bring snacks." A weak smile appeared on Mia's lips despite the heaviness in her chest. "I'd like that." As Dylan stepped back, guiding Kayla toward the door, he turned one last time. "Admiral, you didn't lose your future today," he said softly. "You just lost the wrong person." Mia felt her breath hitch. When they left, the room suddenly felt emptier, but not hollow like before. More like a space waiting to be filled. She unfolded the letter once more, looked at it, then folded it again with new resolve. The pain was still real, but for the first time since the accident, something else was beginning to bloom hope. The next morning dawned with a brightness that felt almost cruel. Sunlight spilled across Naval Station Norfolk, reflecting off white buildings, polished brass, and marching rows of cadets who seemed to embody everything Mia used to feel purpose, momentum, strength. Now she moved through the base in her wheelchair, feeling exposed in a way she never had before. Her uniform still fit perfectly crisp and immaculate, yet it felt heavier, as if every thread now carried the burden of last night's humiliation. Conversations quieted as she passed. Glances flicked her way, some sympathetic, some curious, some judgmental. A few tried to mask their expressions, but not well enough. Whispers followed her like shadows. Wasn't that yesterday's wedding? I heard he left her at the altar. Poor Admiral Hale, such a shame. She used to be unstoppable before the accident. Used to be. As if she was a ruined version of herself. Mia kept her posture, straight chin, lifted, refusing to let her emotions spill in front of subordinates. The weight of the uniform had always symbolized pride, responsibility, honor. Today it felt like armor with cracks she couldn't repair. She turned toward the central courtyard, the heart of base activity, when she heard a familiar small voice calling out. Admiral Princess Mia blinked. There, running toward her with her backpack bouncing wildly, was Kayla Carter. Behind her was Dylan pushing a mop bucket across the concrete walkway, with the quiet determination of someone who took pride in work no one else appreciated. Kayla skidded to a stop, right in front of Mia, grinning ear to ear. "We found you again." Despite herself, Mia felt her rigid expression soften. "Good morning, Kayla." The little girl's eyes sparkled. "Daddy said you're the bravest lady on the whole base. I decided that's true." Heat rose to Mia's cheeks. Not embarrassment, but an emotion she couldn't fully place. It felt like someone tending a wound she'd forgotten how to treat. Dylan arrived seconds later, pausing to wipe damp hands on his fatigues before giving a respectful nod. "Morning, ma'am." Mia returned the nod gently. "Morning, Dylan." She didn't expect what happened next. A cluster of officers, 3 lieutenants and a chief rounded the corner, chatting loudly. When they saw Mia, their expressions shifted. They slowed. One of them, Lieutenant Harris, whispered something under his breath, his mouth twisting with a mixture of pity and judgment. Another murmured, "She shouldn't be on duty." Not like this. Mia's stomach tightened. Then came the voice she dreaded most. Evan. He emerged from the hallway like he was expecting applause, not backlash. His perfectly pressed uniform, immaculate posture, and calculated charm were the same as ever. But when his eyes landed on Mia, something cold flickered behind them. Annoyance, maybe even guilt, twisted into something he tried to disguise as concern. "Mia," he said loudly, as if he still had any right to speak her name. "You shouldn't be out here. Your emotional state is unstable. You should be resting. Emotional state. Unstable." He was setting the narrative, publicly. Her hands tightened on her wheels. Before she could respond, Dylan stepped closer, subtly, not aggressively, but the message was clear. He positioned himself half a step ahead of Mia, shoulders squared, posture, grounded like he'd taken root in the concrete. Kayla immediately looped her arm through Mia's, glaring at Evan with a fierce protectiveness only children possess. Evan's gaze flicked to Dylan, confusion crossing his face. "You are maintenance?" Dylan answered simply. Evan gave a dismissive huff. "This isn't your concern." Dylan's voice didn't rise. It didn't sharpen, but it held an authority even Evan couldn't ignore. "Respectfully, sir. Treating a superior officer like she's broken is everyone's concern." The courtyard fell silent. The junior officers behind Evan shifted nervously. A few cadets paused mid-step to watch. Even the breeze seemed to hush. Mia's breath caught. Evan narrowed his eyes. "Watch your tone, Carter. This is Navy business." "This is Navy business," Dylan replied, voice steady. "Admiral Hale deserves respect. You don't get to strip that away because you're uncomfortable seeing the consequences of your own choices." Mia's heart thundered. Evan froze, shock flashing across his face. No one, absolutely no one on this base had spoken to him like that. Kayla tugged on Mia's sleeve. "Admiral Princess, do you want me to bite him?" Mia let out a strangled, unexpected laugh, one that bubbled out before she could stop it. Dylan barked a soft chuckle despite himself. Evan's face reddened. This is inappropriate. I won't stand here and be. You already walked away once Dylan interrupted, calm but devastating. We all saw how that turned out. Gasps rippled around them. Mia couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. But not because she was embarrassed, because for the first time in months, someone stood, really stood for her. Not out of duty, not out of pity, but out of conviction. Evan straightened his collar, trying to regain his composure. You have no idea what you're talking about. Mia knows she's fragile right now. There's talk among the board about her mental fitness. I'm simply concerned. Mia flinched. Kayla tightened her little arm around hers protectively. Dylan inhaled slowly. Fragile doesn't mean broken, and needing help doesn't mean unfit. He met Mia's eyes then steadily, respectfully. Everybody needs someone to stand with them sometimes. The words hit her harder than Evan's betrayal. Lieutenant Harris muttered under his breath, but Dylan shot him a look so cold it froze him mid-step. Kayla lifted her chin. We stand with her. Dylan placed a hand gently on Kayla's shoulder. Easy, sweetheart. But Mia felt something shift inside her, something heavy and suffocating beginning to loosen. Power. Belonging. Worth. Evan exhaled harshly. This conversation is over. Dylan didn't move, neither did Mia. For the first time, Evan couldn't take refuge in his rank. He turned sharply and walked away, posture rigid with frustration and bruised pride. The courtyard remained still until the last echo of his footsteps faded. Then Kayla whispered proudly, We scared the bad guy. Dylan sighed. He's not a bad guy, honey. Just someone who made a very bad choice. But Mia, still reeling, murmured, Thank you. Dylan met her gaze. His eyes softened. Any time, Admiral. As they walked, well-rolled away together, Mia felt a strange sensation settle in her chest. Not weakness, not shame, but the first threads of courage knitting themselves back together. Because today, someone stood beside her, and she was no longer carrying the weight of her uniform alone. Rain came to Norfolk without warning, thick, heavy sheets that slammed against rooftops and flooded gutters faster than the city could drain them. Thunder rolled over the base like distant artillery, rattling window frames and slicing through the night. Admiral Mia Hale sat in her dimly lit quarters, staring at the untouched dinner tray on the table. The storm outside felt like a mirror of the storm inside her, loud, relentless, impossible to outrun. Her conversation with Evan earlier echoed painfully in her mind. The whispers around the base, Dylan's quiet defense of her, Kayla's fierce loyalty. She wished she could shut her mind off even for one night. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Dylan Carter. Her heart jolted. She hesitated only a second before answering. Mia, his voice was trembling, not with fear, but with urgency. It's Kayla. She's not breathing right. Mia's world snapped into focus. What happened? She demanded, already turning her wheelchair toward the door. She said her chest hurt. Then she collapsed. I'm at the base housing clinic, but the storm knocked out half the staff. They're overwhelmed. His breaths came sharp, uneven. I don't know what to do. No rank, no formalities, no walls. Mia's voice dropped into the anchored steadiness of command. Stay with her. I'm on my way. But Mia, the storm, I said I'm coming. The line went silent, but she could feel Dylan's relief through the static. Lightning cracked across the sky as she pushed her wheelchair into the rain, ignoring the sting of cold drops against her uniform. Every push felt like lifting a mountain, but she didn't slow. She couldn't. Not for Kayla. Not for the little girl who had been the only light in her darkest morning. By the time she reached the clinic, her hair and uniform were soaked. Water dripped from the edges of her sleeves, pooling beneath her wheels. She shoved through the glass door, breathless and shaking. The waiting room was dimly lit, emergency generators humming weakly. Families huddled together. Nurses dashed between rooms, with too few hands for too many crises. But Mia saw Dylan immediately. He was kneeling beside a small bed in the corner, drenched in rain, cradling Kayla's hand in both of his. His face, usually composed, steady, looked like it was splitting apart. "Mia," he stood quickly when he saw her. "I didn't know who else to call. You called the right person," she said, voice soft but firm. Kayla lay pale and still, her breathing shallow and ragged. A faint, wheezing tremor rattled her chest with every inhale. "Sweetheart, Mia whispered, moving closer. "I'm here." Kayla's eyes fluttered open. "Admiral. Princess." The words were barely audible. Mia felt her throat tighten around a rising swell of fear. "Hey, little warrior. You're okay. We're all right here with you." Dylan scrubbed a hand over his face. "They're trying to stabilize her, but the on-call cardiologist's stuck on the interstate. Flooding. If they can't adjust her medication dosage soon," Mia didn't let him finish. She turned sharply toward the nearest nurse station. "Who is the highest-ranking medical officer on site?" A flustered nurse lifted her head. "Ma'am, we're short-staffed. Lieutenant Rowan is doing her best." "But where is she?" The nurse pointed down the hall. Mia wheeled herself with force she didn't know she still possessed. She found Lieutenant Rowan elbow-deep in 3 overlapping emergencies. 1 child with an asthma attack, 1 sailor with a deep laceration, and 1 older woman fainting from shock. "Maya Hale," Admiral Maya introduced sharply. "I need Kayla Carter's chart now." Rowan blinked. "Ma'am, we're drowning here. I don't know if Mia's voice sharpened. Lieutenant, that little girl's cardiac history is complex. She needs an immediate dosage adjustment. If we delay, she risks arrest." Rowan exhaled shakily. I know. But without the cardiologist." "Give me the chart," Mia said. "I'll walk you through it." Rowan hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The next 10 minutes blurred. Mia's training as a commanding officer wasn't medical, but years coordinating joint rescue operations meant she knew how to triage, how to prioritize, how to lead. She guided Rowan through Kayla's case, with precision, identifying key markers, symptoms, risk levels, and emergency protocols. When the dosage was finally prepared, Rowan rushed back to Kayla with Mia close behind. Dylan stood frozen as the injection was administered. Kayla gasped, one sharp, painful breath, then slowly, her chest eased into a steadier rhythm. Dylan's legs gave out, and he slumped into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders trembled, not from fear, now, but from release. Mia reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "She's going to stabilize," she said softly. "She's strong." Dylan lifted his head, eyes red, expression raw. "I thought I was going to lose her." "You won't," Mia whispered. "Not tonight." Thunder rolled overhead, shaking the windows. For a long stretch of minutes, the 3 of them hovered in silence, broken only by the medical monitors beeping steadily beside Kayla's bed. Then Dylan spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you come?" Mia blinked. "You called. I know," he said. "But after everything you went through yesterday, you still came into a storm. For us." Her voice was quiet but unwavering. "Because you stayed when no one else did." Dylan stared at her, really stared, like seeing her for the first time. Not the Admiral, not the woman in a wheelchair, but the person beneath. Slowly, he reached out and covered her hand with his. Rain hammered outside. But inside between them, something gentle settled, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Kayla stirred again, her small voice, weak but steady. "Daddy. Admiral, Princess. Both Mia and Dylan leaned in at once. "We're right here, honey," Dylan whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. "We're not going anywhere," Mia added softly. For the first time that night, Kayla smiled, and for the first time in a very long time, Mia realized storms didn't only destroy. Sometimes, they brought the right people together under the same roof. The storm finally broke near dawn. A pale gray light seeped through the windows of the base clinic, washing over everything in a soft, tired glow. The worst of the night was over, at least for the world outside. But inside the quiet room where Kayla Carter slept, the emotional storm was still settling. Mia Hale hadn't moved from her place beside Kayla. She'd refused the nurse's offers to rest. She'd refused the blanket someone tried to drape over her shoulders. She sat in her wheelchair, hands folded on her lap, eyes trained on the steady rise and fall of Kayla's breathing. Only that mattered. Only that small, fragile movement told Mia she hadn't made the same mistake Evan had, turning away when someone needed her the most. Dylan Carter had fallen asleep in the chair next to his daughter, his posture slumped, his face softened by exhaustion. Even in sleep, one hand rested lightly over Kayla's, protective, constant, the kind of presence Mia once believed she had in her life. Now seeing Dylan's quiet devotion, she realized she had never known what that truly looked like. Kayla shifted slightly and opened her eyes, squinting at the light. "Daddy," she whispered. Dylan jolted awake instantly. "Hey," he said softly, brushing her hair back. "Easy, sweetheart. You scared me pretty good last night." Kayla's gaze wandered and found Mia. "Admiral Princess. You stayed?" Mia smiled gently. "Of course I stayed." The little girl reached out her hand weakly. Mia took it without hesitation. "Thank you," Kayla murmured, eyelids drooping again. When she drifted back to sleep, Dylan exhaled a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. He stood and walked a few steps away to the far corner of the room, rubbing his eyes. His movements were stiff, almost as if he were trying to compose himself before facing Mia again. She rolled her wheelchair toward him quietly. "Dylan." He lowered his hand from his face. His eyes were red, not just from exhaustion, but from everything that happened last night. "Mia," he said softly, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," she replied. "I just did what anyone should do." His gaze held hers for a long moment. "No," he whispered. "Most people don't do that. I called people before I called you. Neighbors, friends, even Kayla's godmother." A bitter smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. No one picked up. Mia felt her chest tighten. "I'm sorry." Dylan shook his head. "You answered on the first ring." Silence settled between them, quiet, but full like a bridge forming. Mia inhaled slowly. "Dylan, I know what it feels like, to be left when life becomes complicated." His eyes softened. "I figured Evan didn't walk out because you changed. He walked out because he didn't know how to stay." Mia swallowed hard. "Exactly." And Dylan added quietly, "Some people forget that love isn't just for the easy days." Mia's voice trembled despite her efforts to remain steady. "You didn't forget." He leaned against the wall, arms folded loosely. Kayla's condition scared her mom. "I get it. A sick kid is overwhelming." His gaze drifted toward his daughter, who slept peacefully again. But abandoning her? That's something I'll never understand. People show who they really are in moments like that, Mia whispered. "And you," Dylan said, meeting her eyes again, showed exactly who you are last night. The words hit her harder than any insult she'd heard in the last 48 hours. Not because they hurt, but because they healed something. For the first time in months, Mia felt seen, not as an injured officer, not as a discarded fiancé, not as a woman in a wheelchair, but as someone capable, trusted, needed. She turned her gaze back to Kayla. "She's strong," Mia murmured. "Stronger than most adults I know." Dylan nodded. "She gets that from her mom. Before things fell apart, her mother was full of light. Kayla took that part of her." Mia hesitated. "Dylan, may I ask something?" He glanced at her. "Sure, what are you afraid of?" Most Dylan looked genuinely surprised. He wasn't used to people asking him questions. Not personal ones. Not ones that mattered. He looked at Kayla again, voice quieting. Losing her. Not being enough for her. Not being able to fix the things I can't control. Mia nodded slowly. "I understand that too well." "And you?" he asked gently. "What are you most afraid of?" Mia stared at her hands for several seconds, contemplating the honesty of her answer. "Not being worthy anymore," she said finally. "Not in the Navy. Not in a relationship. Not in life." Dylan's brows knitted. "Mia, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You held yourself together yesterday when most people would have collapsed. You defended Kayla without thinking twice. You led a medical triage like you were born to do it. You." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "Dylan," he stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You didn't lose your worth when you lost the ability to walk. You didn't lose your value because someone couldn't handle your strength. You are not broken." Her eyes glistened. "Then why does it feel like I am Dylan?" Paused, searching for the right words. "Because," he said slowly, "you were hurt by someone you trusted, and wounds from betrayal don't heal like physical ones. They take time, and sometimes they take help." She met his gaze, steady, warm, full of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. "Dylan," she murmured, "I don't know how to let people help me." He smiled faintly. "Then let us be the first." Kayla stirred again, eyes fluttering open. "Daddy. Admiral, Princess." She held out both hands. Dylan and Mia moved instinctively, one on each side, to take them. The little girl sighed contentedly. "See strong together." Mia and Dylan exchanged a glance over Kayla's small frame. Shared scars. Shared strength. The room fell into a peaceful quiet, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain easing into morning. But just as Mia's shoulders began to relax, a nurse hurried in, holding a clipboard with furrowed brows. "Admiral Hale?" she asked. "Yes," Mia replied. "There's something you need to know." A message came from the internal review board. Mia's heartbeat stumbled. The nurse continued, voice tense. "They've reopened your case. They're questioning your fitness for command again, and they want you on standby for a formal evaluation." The air grew heavy. Dylan straightened, jaw tightening. Mia felt the storm return, not outside, but inside her chest. Just when she'd begun to feel whole again. Another threat waited on the horizon. The message from the review board hit Mia like a second storm, silent, sharp, and cold. She stared at the nurse for a long moment, the weight of the words sinking into her bones. "Your fitness for command is under investigation again." Her hands tightened against the rims of her wheels, the metal cool beneath her palms. She'd fought through pain, humiliation, and betrayal, but this was an attack on the part of her identity she had poured her entire life into. "Thank you," she managed to say. Her voice was calm, but her pulse was hammering. When the nurse left, the room fell into a thick, uneasy silence. Dylan stood beside Kayla's bed, hands flexing unconsciously at his sides. "They're going after you because of him." Mia didn't need to ask who he meant. Evan, his influence, his guilt, his fear of being exposed. She forced out a slow breath. "They've questioned me before. After the accident, they wanted to know if the head trauma affected my judgment, if the wheelchair would hinder command decisions, if the pressure changed me." "And it didn't," Dylan said firmly. Not in a way that makes me unfit, Mia whispered. But in the Navy, perception becomes reality faster than truth can catch up. Dylan paced, jaw clenched. Evan's poisoning the air around you. First the wedding, then the rumors. Now this. He's burying you to save himself. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw something fierce in his eyes. Protective, loyal, deeply wounded by what she was being forced to endure. She wasn't used to someone being angry on her behalf. "Dylan," she said softly, "you don't have to." But he cut her off with quiet conviction. "I stay. Mia, remember." Her breath caught. His words, simple, solid, felt like a hand reaching into the dark to pull her forward. Before she could answer, Kayla stirred again, blinking up at them. "Daddy, Admiral, Princess." Her voice was groggy, but stronger than earlier. Dylan was instantly at her side. "Hey, sweetie, how are you feeling?" "Like I swallowed a thundercloud," Kayla mumbled. Despite everything, Mia's lips twitched into a smile. "You gave us a scare." Kayla reached for both of them. They each took her small hands, forming a fragile chain of strength around the bed. "I heard you talking," Kayla whispered. "Is someone being mean to Admiral?" Princess Dylan swallowed. "Something like that." Kayla scowled in a way only a 7-year-old could. "Tell me where he is." Maya chuckled softly. "You really are a little warrior." Kayla puffed proudly. "Daddy says warriors protect good people." Mia's gaze shifted to Dylan. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat too long. She saw something in them she had only seen once before, yesterday, when he stepped in front of Evan. A man ready to fight for someone he cared about. Kayla's eyelids drooped again, and she fell back asleep, her breathing calm and steady now. When the room grew quiet, Dylan lowered his voice. "Tell me about the accident." Mia inhaled sharply. The memory was a wound she had tried to bury under resolve and routine. "It happened during a rescue operation," she said slowly. "We were evacuating civilians from a compromised structure overseas. I was leading the team when something felt wrong. I radioed for updated intel." Her eyes darkened. Evan was the tactical officer on watch. Dylan stiffened. "He was the one giving you commands that day." "Yes." Her voice wavered just slightly. "I questioned one of his orders. Told him the structure didn't look stable from our angle. He snapped back that I was overthinking it, that I needed to proceed according to plan." "What happened?" Mia's gaze drifted unfocused, her voice hollowed by the memory. The floor gave out. "I fell 2 stories. Debris crushed my spine." Dylan closed his eyes, jaw tightening. And instead of owning his mistake, he hid it. "He filed the after-action report himself," Mia whispered. "Claimed the collapse was unpredictable. And with everything that followed surgery rehab, the evaluations, I didn't have the clarity to challenge it." Dylan didn't move for a long moment. Then he said, "I know someone." Maya looked up. "What a man I served with," Dylan said. "He transferred to base archives after leaving the field. He has access to old mission logs, tactical audio, black box backups that never made it into finalized reports." Maya's breath caught. "Dylan, if Evan manipulated anything." "Then there's a record," Dylan said firmly. "And we can find it." Her pulse quickened. Fear and hope crashing into each other. "You'd do that for me." He held her gaze. "I'm not going to stand by and watch someone destroy you. Not when I know you did nothing wrong." Emotion hit her like a punch to the sternum, unexpected, overwhelming. No one had fought for her like this. Not in months. Maybe not ever. "Dylan," she whispered. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "He didn't just betray you at the altar. He betrayed you long before that." A tremor ran through her hands. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the clinic door burst open. A young corporal rushed inside, water still dripping from his uniform. "Admiral Hale," he said, breathlessly. "Yes," Mia replied. "There's been a request from Internal Affairs. They want you in person tomorrow morning. Official review. Early." And he hesitated, glancing at Dylan. "They've asked Commander Evan Brooks to provide testimony." Mia felt her stomach drop. Dylan muttered a curse under his breath. Of course they did. The corporal saluted and left. Dylan turned to Mia immediately. "We're not letting him control the narrative. Not again." She swallowed hard. "Dylan, what if I can't fight this? What if the board believes him? Then we give them something stronger than his lies," he said. The truth. She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to cling to the conviction in his voice. "Let me talk to my friend," Dylan said. "Let me see what he can find." Mia nodded slowly, breath unsteady. "All right." He reached for her hand hesitantly at first, then with steady warmth. "You're not going into that review alone." She squeezed his hand back. For the first time since the accident, she felt something powerful rising beneath the fear. Not just strength, courage, the kind that demands you face the past, head on even when it threatens to break you all over again. The morning of the internal review began with a silence so unnervingly calm that it made the hairs on Mia's arms rise. Norfolk was usually awake by sunrise. Boots striking pavement, ship horns blaring across the water, and clipped military orders echoing across the courtyard. But this morning felt different, hushed, cautious, heavy with judgment she could almost taste in the air. Dylan had already left the clinic before dawn, heading toward the restricted archives section to meet the former teammate. He'd mentioned someone who might hold the key to unraveling the truth behind her accident. Mia stayed behind, watching Kayla sleep peacefully after her ordeal, trying to draw strength from the small girl's breathing. It reminded her that not every battle was lost, that healing wasn't impossible. But as she wheeled herself into the hallway, she felt the familiar weight of the uniform settle over her shoulders, not just its fabric, but everything it symbolized. Honor, responsibility, expectation. And today, fragility. She hated that word. A few nurses offered polite smiles as she passed, but their eyes betrayed worry or pity. She wasn't sure which hurt more. Outside, the wind rustled the trees along the walkway. Mia wheeled herself slowly, each turn of the rims feeling heavier than the last. The review board loomed in her mind like a tribunal, waiting to carve out her dignity inch by inch. When she reached the entrance to the clinic lobby, the automatic doors opened and Dylan stood there, waiting. Mia froze. His hair was wind-tossed, and his clothes bore faint dust marks, like he'd been somewhere he shouldn't have been. His expression was serious, focused, but softened when he saw her. "You came back," she said, surprised. "Of course I did," he replied simply. "You're not walking into that room alone." Her breath hitched. "You found something." Dylan shook his head. "Not yet. But my friend is digging now. He thinks there's a missing audio clip from the day of your accident, something Evan didn't include in his official report." Mia's pulse quickened. If that exists, it could clear everything. "It could," he said. "But we don't have it yet, and the board won't wait." She exhaled shakily, bracing herself. "Then I guess we go in with what we have." Dylan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What you have, Admiral, is your integrity, your record, your courage, and the fact that every single person under your command would follow you into a firestorm without hesitation." His words washed over her like warmth against cold metal. She didn't know how to respond, didn't know how to thank him for showing up again and again when the world kept trying to make her feel small. Before she could speak, Kayla's voice called from behind them. "Daddy. Admiral Princess." They both turned. Kayla stood at the lobby doors in her pajamas, holding a piece of folded paper. A nurse hurried after her apologizing, but Kayla brushed past gently and walked straight to Mia. "You forgot this," she said quietly, handing her the paper. Mia unfolded it. A drawing crayon, crooked lines, bright colors. 3 figures beneath a sky full of stars. The small one in the middle, Kayla. The tall one, Dylan. The one in the wheelchair, her. Above them, written in shaky 7-year-old handwriting, "This is what families look like." Mia's heart nearly stopped. Her throat tightened until she could barely breathe. Tears stung her eyes, threatening to fall, but she blinked them back fiercely. Dylan knelt beside Kayla, brushing a curl from her face. "Sweetheart." "Why did you draw this?" Kayla shrugged like it was the simplest truth in the world. "Because Admiral Princess is ours." Mia pressed a hand over her mouth. Dylan looked at Mia. No smile. No embarrassment. Just a quiet knowing. A truth neither of them had dared speak aloud. Kayla looked up again, voice barely a whisper. "Please don't let the mean people take her away." Mia's chest cracked open. She wheeled forward and cupped Kayla's cheek. "No one is taking me away, sweetheart." "But they're trying," Kayla insisted. "Daddy thinks so. I heard him." Dylan winced. "Kayla." Mia shook her head gently. "It's all right." Kayla fidgeted with her hands. "I don't want you to disappear like Mommy did." The words hit them both like a blow. Kayla wasn't talking about the Navy. She was talking about abandonment, loss, losing someone she had learned to love in such a short time. Mia leaned forward until her forehead rested gently against Kayla's. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Not if I have anything to say about it." Dylan looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening his throat, bobbing before he reached out and squeezed Mia's shoulder. "Come on," he said softly. "You're ready." And somehow, she was. As they left the clinic together, Mia felt a shift inside her, not dramatic or loud, but steady and certain. She wasn't walking into the review to defend her right to lead. She was walking in to reclaim the truth. The hallway leading to the boardroom felt endless. Officers passed by, some offering snaps of salute, others avoiding her eyes entirely. But Dylan stayed at her side, adjusting his pace to match hers without a second thought. When they finally reached the double doors of the review chamber, Mia inhaled deeply. The moment had come. Dylan bent down a little so their eyes were level. "Mia," he said softly, "you are not defined by the lies someone else tells about you." Her lips parted. "And you," he continued, "are not fighting this battle alone." She didn't trust herself to speak. Instead, she nodded, placed the drawing Kayla gave her into the pocket near her heart, and turned toward the doors. She had feared this day for months. Now she faced it with a heart that finally understood something vital. Strength doesn't come from standing on 2 legs. It comes from knowing who stands with you when the world tries to knock you down. Maya pushed the doors open. She wasn't afraid anymore. The review chamber was colder than any room Mia Hale had ever entered. Not because of the temperature, but because of the eyes. 6 officers sat behind a long mahogany table. Uniforms, spotless, posture rigid. The Navy crest hung behind them like a silent judge. Beside the board sat 2 legal advisors and a recorder typing steadily, every keystroke echoing like a ticking clock. Then there was Evan. He stood near the front, immaculate in his uniform expression, carefully practiced somewhere between concern and authority. But his eyes flicked toward Mia with something else entirely. Fear. Control. Desperation hidden beneath rank. Mia didn't look away. Dylan entered behind her. Not inside the chamber. Visitors weren't allowed, but he stood just beyond the glass wall, visible from her seat. His shoulders squared, his hands clasped behind his back, that quiet strength anchoring her. Kayla sat beside him, holding the drawing she made for Mia against her chest like a tiny shield of hope. For a moment, Mia let herself breathe. Admiral Hale, the senior officer, began adjusting his glasses. This review concerns your physical and psychological fitness for continued command. Mia nodded. Understood, sir. And he continued allegations regarding your judgment during the operation that resulted in your injury. A rustle went through the room. Mia steadied herself. The officer gestured. Commander Brooks has submitted testimony and documentation. He will speak first. Mia could feel Dylan's tension through the glass. If Evan controlled this narrative, everything, her career, her dignity, her future, could be stripped away in minutes. Evan stepped forward, clearing his throat as though this were a performance he had rehearsed. Members of the board, he began smoothly. First, let me express that this is not personal. I have always respected Admiral Hale, but after her accident, her decision-making capacity has changed. He let the last word linger like a poisonous drop. She has become emotionally volatile, distracted, hesitant. She second-guessed orders during the mission orders that required immediate execution to save civilian lives. Mia gripped her wheels until her knuckles whitened. Evan continued. Had she followed protocol without hesitation, the collapse might not have happened. And now, considering recent emotional events, it is clear she is not stable enough for high command. The board members murmured quietly. Evan stepped back with an air of grim professionalism, as though he had just carried out a painful duty. Admiral Hale, the senior officer, said, "You may respond." Mia inhaled deeply. Her voice, when it came, was steady. Not loud, not desperate. Just true. "I accept responsibility for my actions that day," she said. "But I didn't act out of hesitation. I acted out of instinct. I questioned an order that didn't match the intel we observed in the field." The room shifted. "My mistake was trusting a report that did not account for structural instability. And I trusted that report because it came from someone I believed would never endanger me or the civilians under my command." Her eyes locked onto Evan. He didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. "I have served the Navy for over 20 years," she continued. "I have made difficult calls, endured loss, and sacrificed more than most will ever know. I do not claim perfection, but I do claim integrity." One of the officers leaned forward. "Admiral, do you have evidence supporting your concerns about the mission?" "Data." Mia opened her mouth. The doors at the back of the chamber burst open. All heads turned. A corporal hurried in, saluted sharply, and said, "Permission to deliver newly recovered tactical data." Sir Evan's face drained of color. The senior officer frowned. "From where base archives, sir?" the corporal replied. "Recovered 30 minutes ago. It includes an audio file tagged from the day of the collapse. Backup recording that was never added to the report." Mia's heart hammered. The corporal placed the file drive on the table. The chair signaled to the tech officer. "Play it." A few seconds of static filled the room. Then a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. Mia's voice. "Command, this doesn't look stable. Request updated intel." A pause. Then Evan's voice came through, sharp, impatient, and unmistakable. "Proceed, Admiral. You're overreacting. Follow the damn order." Gasps rippled across the chamber. Evan shot to his feet. That is out of context. But the audio continued. "Mia, I'm telling you it isn't right." "Evan, you're hesitating again. Execute the plan." "Mia. No, I'm calling it in, Evan. Admiral, if you don't move now." Then the sound of metal groaning, shouting, a crash. Mia's scream. Silence. The recording clicked to an end. Every pair of eyes turned sharply toward Evan, and for the first time since Mia met him, he looked small, cornered, exposed. The senior officer's voice was ice. "Commander Brooks, why was this omitted from your report?" Evan's lips parted, but no sound came out. Then Kayla from behind the glass pressed her tiny hand against it and whispered to Mia, though no one inside could hear her, "You're winning." Dylan stood beside her, his eyes burning with unspoken pride. Mia straightened her posture stronger than she had felt since the accident. "Members of the board," she said quietly, "I trusted a man who prioritized his ego over my life, and over the truth." She paused. "I will not apologize for surviving." The room erupted into whispers. The senior officer raised a hand calling for order. Then he stood slowly and looked directly at Mia. "Admiral Hale," he said, "on behalf of this board, we offer our respect and our apology." And one by one, every member of the review board stood and saluted her. A deep, reverent salute, not out of pity, not out of protocol, but out of honor. Evan remained seated, trembling as security approached him. The senior officer turned toward him. "Commander Brooks, you are relieved of duty pending further investigation into evidence tampering and falsifying official reports." Maya exhaled slowly, her shoulders shaking not from fear, but from release. The truth had finally found its voice. And in that moment, through the glass, Dylan placed his palm against the window level with her heart. Kayla lifted her drawing again, smiling wide. Ma closed her eyes. After months of pain, humiliation, and doubt, she stood taller than she ever had, even sitting in a wheelchair. A full year had passed, yet the memory of that review board still lived inside Mia Hale like a storm she had finally survived. Not every day since then had been easy, but every day had been hers, chosen, owned, rebuilt, piece by piece. The Navy cleared her name. The truth spread across the base like wildfire. Officers who once whispered now saluted with pride. And Evan's career crumbled under the weight of his lies, leaving Mia free from the shadow that had nearly destroyed her. But the greatest change wasn't in the Navy, it was in her heart. This morning, sunlight filtered through the tall pines as Mia wheeled across the soft grass toward the one place she had avoided for 12 long months, the ceremonial lawn where she'd been left sitting in her white uniform, abandoned and humiliated. But today was different. Today, there were no guests, no gossiping officers, no man walking away from her. Today, only two people waited for her at the archway, Dylan Carter and his daughter Kayla, standing exactly where her broken world had once collapsed. Dylan's hands were tucked in his pockets, but the moment he saw her, his whole face softened like sunrise, warming the cold edges of night. "Hey," he said gently, "you made it." Mia inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the moment. "I wasn't sure I could." "You didn't have to come alone," Dylan reminded her. "I didn't." She smiled softly. "I came to meet you." Kayla bounced forward, her hair flying. "Admiral, Princess, we're ready." Mia laughed, the sound lighter than she expected. "Ready for what?" Kayla held up a small sign made of cardboard, decorated with glittery stars and crooked handwriting. "Today we fix the sad day." Mia's hand drifted to her heart. Dylan walked toward her, his boots crunching softly in the grass. "I know this place holds a lot of pain," he said. "You told me coming back here felt impossible." Mia nodded. It did. But today Dylan continued, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. "We're going to rewrite the memory. Not erase it. Rewrite it." Her lips parted in surprise. "Rewrite it." He gestured around them. "You were abandoned here, betrayed, humiliated." His voice softened. "But that doesn't have to be the memory that lives in this place anymore." Maya blinked back tears. "Dylan." He reached for her hand slowly, reverently, and she didn't hesitate to place hers in his. "Today," he whispered, "you came back with people who love you, people who stayed." Kayla raced behind Mia and gave her wheelchair a gentle squeeze. "We stayed." Mia let out a shaky breath as emotion washed over her. The wind was soft, carrying the scent of the sea, a reminder of everything she had overcome. She glanced at the archway. No flowers this time. No aisle, no pressure. Only truth. "Dylan," she said quietly. "I thought I'd never step or roll onto this field again. I thought it would always belong to Evan and that moment of failure." "Nothing about that moment was your failure," Dylan said, voice firm. "And this place, it belongs to you, not to him." Mia swallowed hard. "Then why did you bring me here today?" Dylan drew a deep breath, then moved with deliberate care. He lowered himself onto one knee. Mia froze. Her heart stumbled. Her breath halted. The world narrowed to the man kneeling before her in the morning light. "Mia Hale," he began, voice steady, but filled with emotion. "You once sat here believing you were unworthy of love, believing you were broken, believing you had nothing left to offer." Tears pooled in her eyes. "But I see you," Dylan continued. "I see your courage, your strength, your kindness, your brilliance. I see the woman who saved my daughter's life, who saved mine in ways I still haven't found the words for." Her chest tightened painfully but beautifully. "You weren't abandoned here, Mia." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, simple silver ring. "You were just waiting for the right person to arrive." Mia covered her mouth, overcome. Kayla hopped up and down excitedly, unable to stay still. "Ask her daddy." "Ask her." Dylan smiled, just barely, never looking away from Mia. "I want to rewrite this memory with you," he said softly. "With love, with hope, with a future we build together. So, Mia Hale," he held the ring gently, not pushing it forward yet, just waiting. "Will you marry me?" Mia felt the world tilt, not from fear, not from doubt, but from the overwhelming certainty swelling in her heart. She hadn't expected this. Not here. Not today. Not from a man who walked into her life as quietly as a whisper and rebuilt her piece by piece. She wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. Dylan. Before she could speak, Kayla ran up, holding her cardboard sign again, lifting it high with fierce determination. "Will you be my bonus mom?" The tears finally broke free. This field once broke her. Now it was healing her. Mia extended her hand, touching Dylan's cheek, her voice thick but sure. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. 1,000 times. Yes." Kayla squealed. Dylan's eyes glistened as he slid the ring onto Mia's finger. Then Kayla threw her arms around both of them, shouting, "We fixed the sad day." Mia laughed through tears, holding them both tightly. "Yes, sweetheart. We did." And as the sun rose fully over the ceremonial lawn, the ghosts of the past faded into light, replaced by a new memory, a new beginning, and a love she finally believed she deserved. For the first time, the place that once shattered her heart felt like holy ground. The chapel on Naval Station Norfolk was small, far smaller than the grand ceremonial lawn, where Mia Hale's old life had shattered, but today it felt like the safest place in the world. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, scattering soft hues of gold, blue, and crimson across the polished floor. The light caught on the curve of dress shoes, the shine of military medals, and the delicate white trim of a little girl's dress. Mia sat near the front, her white navy uniform immaculate, tailored perfectly to fit her wheelchair. The fabric shimmered softly in the morning light, not as a reminder of what she'd lost, but of everything she had reclaimed. Her hair was pinned neatly, her insignia gleamed, and for the first time in years, her smile wasn't something she had to force. Today she wasn't an abandoned bride. She wasn't a wounded officer fighting to prove herself. She was a woman stepping into joy, freely, fully, and without fear. "Are you nervous?" Kayla whispered, standing beside her in a pale blue dress that matched her eyes. "Not at all," Mia replied gently. "Not today." Kayla grinned. Good. Daddy's nervous enough for both of you. Mia laughed, a soft, breathy sound filled with warmth. Is he? Kayla nodded dramatically, her curls bouncing. He tried to tie his tie 5 times. I counted. Footsteps echoed down the hallway outside the chapel. Then the door opened, and Dylan Carter stepped inside. He looked different today. Not because of his suit, though he wore it well, the dark navy fabric fitting him with surprising elegance, but because of the emotion written all over his face. Awe, gratitude, a little disbelief that today was real, and a fierce, steady love. When his eyes found Mia, he froze for a moment, one heartbeat, where everything else in the world disappeared. Then he walked toward her, slow and reverent, as though approaching something sacred. Hey, he said, softly. Voice thick. You look. Mia raised a brow. Careful. Choose your words wisely. He chuckled, kneeling beside her. You look like the bravest thing I've ever seen. Her breath caught. She wasn't used to this kind of honesty. She wasn't used to being looked at like she was whole, like nothing about her was lacking. Kayla pressed a hand over her mouth. Daddy, don't make her cry before the wedding starts. I don't see any tears, Mia said gently, though her eyes shimmered. Just a lot of happiness. Kayla glanced between them, satisfied. Okay, you two stay here. I have to go make sure everyone knows where to stand. She ran off, skirt swishing, ponytail bouncing with purpose. She took wedding roles more seriously than most commissioned officers took command. Dylan turned back to Mia. Are you ready? Mia looked down at her uniform, crisp, strong, flawless. The same uniform she wore the day her world crumbled. The same uniform she now chose to wear as she built a new life. Yes, she said softly. For the first time. I really am. The ceremony began quietly. A few fellow officers attended, faces familiar and full of respect, not pity. Nurses from the clinic came too, smiling as they saw Kayla twirl her way down the aisle as the unofficial flower girl. Even Lieutenant Rowan stood in the back, arms crossed, trying not to cry. As the officiant spoke, Mia and Dylan held hands, fingers intertwined, steady and warm. When it was Mia's turn to speak, her vows, she took a long, steady breath. Dylan, you came into my life when I was at the lowest point I've ever known. You didn't treat me like I was broken. You didn't look away when things got hard. You stood beside me without expecting praise or recognition or anything at all. You stayed. No medal I've ever earned means as much to me as your quiet strength. Dylan swallowed hard, fighting emotion. She continued, her voice soft but unwavering. With you, I learned that healing isn't something you do alone. It's something you do with the people who love you. You gave me back my courage, my purpose, my heart. And today, I choose you freely, proudly, exactly as you are. Dylan wiped at his eyes quickly, earning a giggle from Kayla. Then it was his turn. Mia, when I met you, you were hurting. But even then, even on the worst day of your life, you carried yourself with more strength than most people can muster in a lifetime. You made Kayla feel safe. You made me feel seen. You showed me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other again and again, even when life gets messy. He reached out, touching her cheek. You're not someone who lost her ability to walk. You're someone who found a new way to fly. Mia's breath caught. Kayla beamed proudly. Daddy said the line. The audience chuckled. When the rings were exchanged, simple bands, elegant and meaningful, Mia felt something settle inside her. Something peaceful. Something hopeful. When the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, Dylan leaned in and kissed her, gentle, warm, steady. The kind of kiss that whispered, "We made it, and we'll make everything else together." The chapel erupted in applause. Kayla ran up immediately, hugging both their waists. We're a family now. Officially, I checked. Mia laughed through joyful tears. Yes, sweetheart. Officially. And as they stepped out of the chapel into the sunlight, Mia's hand resting warmly in Dylan's. Kayla skipping between them, Mia felt something rise in her chest. Not pain, not fear, not the shadow of Evan or the accident or the board, but gratitude. Because in the end, the worst day of her life had led her here. To love, to healing, to a family, to a future built on kindness rather than judgment. Dylan bent to whisper in her ear. See, you never lost your strength. Mia smiled, eyes soft. No, she murmured. I found something even better. The three of them moved forward together, imperfect, resilient, united. And the closing truth echoed gently in Mia's heart. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Your stories, your thoughts, your presence here truly mean the world to us. If this video touched your heart or reminded you of the quiet heroes in your own life, feel free to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next story of kindness, courage, and second chances. Thank you truly for spending your time with us. Your support helps keep these gentle, hopeful stories alive. Wishing you peace, warmth, and a beautiful rest of your day.